All right, let's do a quiz. What's the one dive skill that could actually save your life, but almost no divers ever practice? It's not perfect buoyancy. It's not even emergency ascents. It's something way simpler, but insanely important. Deploying your DSMB. It's not a skill that comes easy for many, and I've certainly made plenty of mistakes myself, so you don't have to, and you can learn from my experiences. In this video, I'll show you exactly how to master it, step by step, how to practice safely and understand why you should always carry a DSMB with you. I've been lucky enough to dive all over the world, and trust me, underwater surprises happen big time, and that's why today's hero is the Delayed Surface Marker Buoy, DSMB, or as affectionately known as a safety sausage. And for fun here, and like a prior video of mine, I'll lovingly use this sausage name through this video. But before we move on to our sausaging, I want to mention that the D for DSMB means delay, and this means you can deploy your safety sausage underwater, while an SMB without the D means you can only deploy it on the surface. The biggest difference will be that DSMBs have an OPV valve, or an overpressure valve, and SMBs likely won't, and we'll talk more about that shortly. But let's talk about our safety sausage. It's a lighthouse for divers. It's a wacky inflatable tube, typically bright orange or yellow, designed for deployment while submerged. This allows divers to mark their position before ascending, giving surface support advance notice of their location or other people on the surface notice that you might emerge. The safety sausage anatomy is simple but effective. It consists of a long sausage tube with an attachment point for a reel or a spool at the base, like a little D ring. Not always in the shape of a D, but some ring. And of course, as mentioned, it's important that your sausage has this OPV to prevent bursting and reflective strips to enhance visibility in low light conditions. The importance of your sausage extends beyond individual dives. They create safer diving environments for everyone. Boat operators become more attuned for watching for these markers, reducing risks of accidents. I've personally learned how crucial it was when a rogue current carried me way off course from the dive site and separated me from my party. But no problem, I deployed my moderately sized red sausage, and that was the only thing that helped the boat find me and realized that I had pulled away from the rest of the dive site. And the important thing was that because I knew how to use a safety sausage and I knew to deploy it immediately as soon as I was separated and I realized I was being taken by the current, that I had no worries. I was not stressed, no problem. I knew as long as I did all these things, the boat should be able to find me and I would be fine. So I could just go ahead and do my safety stop and ascend to the surface, and hopefully the boat's probably there. In fact, I could see the boat arrive before I even got to the surface. Safety sausages will prove invaluable in various scenarios and when you least expect them to shine. For example, when surfacing in areas with boat traffic, a deployed sausage alerts nearby vessels to your presence, significantly reducing collision risks with you. And during drift dives, it allows surface support to follow your progress, ensuring they're in the right place for your exit. And more importantly, you don't surface and find that there's no vessels anywhere in sight and you're lost at sea. Although I want to mention that using a sausage effectively will require practice. You have to practice wielding your sausage. Otherwise, it can be very unwieldy and it can slip right out of your grasp, hurtling towards the surface and sometimes taking you with it. The important part of it is deploying while maintaining your buoyancy. managing your gear, and potentially dealing with currents or low visibility. These skills are crucial when it really counts. Unless you're diving in a secret alpine lake where no one is around for 50 miles, you should always have a sausage with you and be ready to deploy, especially in the ocean, a busy lake, or a quarry. A safety sausage can be a game changer for your safety. And the more of us that use them, the safer diving gets for everybody. All right, enough theory. Let's actually get our hands on. Pause the video and go grab your sausage. Yes, go get it. And let's set it up together. Done? Great. First, let's inspect your sausage for damage and test the inflator mechanism. It's good to do this every now and then and inspect for wear and tear on your sausage, especially if you just pulled it out of storage. These things can take a beating, especially if you're rough on your sausage, so make sure you do your diligence and check them. So looking at your sausage, we can see a few components, one of which is your OPV valve. You can test it and you should be able to pull on the little string and see it get much more sad. Go ahead and also tighten that thing down because sometimes they get loose. As mentioned, this little guy will protect your sausage from exploding right before your eyes. It lets air release from the valve. As it hurtles towards the surface, the gas inside is going to expand. And it's going to continue to expand until your sausage explodes. But if you have an OPV valve, it allows gas to release through the valve. If you don't have an OPV valve, that means your sausage is not a DSMB, but rather an SMB, only designed to be used on the surface. So make sure you have a DSMB that you can use below the surface with one of these OPV valves. Then I want you to be familiar with how you're going to fill this thing with air. It is going to be either open at the bottom. This is not one of the ones that you can fill with a regulator, or you're going to have one of these mouthpieces on it, which will blow in to make your sausage erect. I never realized how dirty that sounds, but it's important. But after you fill your sausage with air, that it's not going to easily let air out. So you can kind of squeeze it a little bit and see just in different areas, the different stitching and such. You should have confidence that this thing is gonna hold its air other than the OPV, which is overpressure. I will go over the fill methods a little bit more in detail shortly. And let's go ahead and talk about the reel or finger spool. Most divers use a finger spool, and this is a finger spool. So I'll mostly just talk about the finger spool since most divers use them because the reels are a little bit more cumbersome. Reels you're probably going to use for tech diving or penetrations of any kind, and that's not really common for recreational diving. And even if you have a reel, some prefer to also have a spool too, so you might just carry both of them. But either way, if you do have a reel, I'm going to be really light on it in this video, but similar principles kind of apply. Just a little bit trickier. A lot of people prefer the finger spool because it is easier to use, and we want to make these things as easy as possible, because if I'm trying to deploy it in a pinch, I want to be able to think as little as possible. And you'll see that I have this thing tied here. And so there is some debate if you want to keep your spool and your sausage separated. And the reason why you might have it separated is because you could use your spool for line or penetration, or you could use your sausage, I don't know, you could take it out and start hitting your dive buddy with it. But you could use these separately. But honestly, it just like to keep things simple, and so it's okay. And most divers are just going to connect these. So it's fine to just keep them connected in your pocket and together. But you certainly, before you deploy your DSMB, will always connect them like this. And so this is just a big hole that you can take your spool through and separate it like this fairly easily. If you buy these separately, the way you thread it is just put one thing through. I also want to point out that this particular line has a little finger nubbin that you can grab. And so not all lines have this built in, but you can, if you wanted to, make a little loop like this and make your own. And it's usually advised that you don't do it like in the perfect middle point. Like this one isn't in the perfect middle point. If I were to show it like this, well, okay, it's a little bit in the middle, but sometimes it's not. Like it should be off a little bit to the side. But you usually want this nubbin because it's easier to grab with thick gloves. And so it makes it easier to grab in a pinch. And so to thread it, you just take your hole like this. And if you were using a line, you want to make a hole here and then go ahead and put your spool through and then tighten it down. And now it's connected and you can just put it in your pocket like this and keep it there. And I like to just keep it connected, and most people do, so it's fine to do. For recreational diving, it's much simpler to keep them attached. Okay, now that we've familiarized ourselves with the two important controls of your sausage, let's go ahead and let the air out and roll it back up. And so when you start rolling this thing up, make sure the OPV is facing away from where you're rolling. So if the OPV is here, I'm going to roll in the opposite direction so that the OPV is going to be on the outside. And so I'm going to just continue to roll until I feel the balloon getting a little bit more full, as so, and then I'm going to release more air. And so it's important too that after you dive, this thing could be filled with water as well. And so to let the water out, you'll probably want to tip it like this and make kind of a V so your OPV is on the bottom, and you can let the water out drain from your sausage as so. And then just keep rolling it up as such until you have it in a nice little burrito. And then you should be able to pull the bungee around it to keep it stable. Practice this a few times to get a little bit used to it, and importantly, and so it doesn't feel awkward when you're doing it underwater, because everything in the water is going to feel a lot harder. So practicing on land will get you a little bit used to it. And you want to go ahead and see how easy it is to unfurl this thing. You kind of want to maneuver, and you don't want this thing to get undone, because it's going to be really shocking if you're diving and you see your safety sausage just flapping all over the place. I've seen it happen to many divers, and it's happened to me. So you kind of want to make sure you see the optimal position to put this bungee so that it doesn't easily come undone, because you'll thank me later. It is definitely shocking when you see this thing flapping all over the place, because it's going to happen and you're going to have to like roll it back up while diving. I mean, it's fine, but you know, better if it doesn't happen. So practice securing your sausage and keeping it in this burrito position for stow. Now, to ensure the line stays tight around the spool, we're going to make sure that the line has no slack or close to no slack. So go ahead and reel that up as nice as you can, and then take a double ender, or it can be a single ender if that works for you, but I prefer doubles. And then go ahead and wrap it 3 times as such. And then you're going to find a hole and clip it to take all the line slack out. So I didn't do a good job here. Ideally, this should be right around here. But of course, you know, recording the video, it's a little tight, but I just want to indicate that the closer you get it to here, the better. And so this is a little bit long, but I want to call that out. And you want to make sure it's wrapped fairly nicely around the clip. It doesn't obviously slip. It's on there fairly well. And just a quick pro tip, if you're finding it hard to get your clip in any of these slots, I would unreel your spool a little bit and then re-reel it in favor one side of your spool. So leaving much bigger and obvious gaps in your spool on one side, it makes it much easier to go ahead and clip into. So if you're having that problem because there's too much line, try that out and that should make it easier. So now it is ready to be stowed, and it can be anywhere on your person, attached to a D-ring with this clip, and that way is on your person for diving. But I do want to advise you don't want this thing flopping around, because it just increases the chance that this bungee is going to come undone and you're going to find a sausage flapping into your face or someone else's face. And you want to be considerate of others with your sausage. So I do highly advise that if you are going to have this flapping around on a D-ring, try to take another bungee and try to keep it tied down to your straps. Or even better, if you have pockets, and I personally favor pockets. Not so much in the DSMB, but generally side pockets along my legs. Those are perfect for this kind of thing. But I do want to advise, even if you use side pockets and they shut, make sure you still clip it on a D-ring if there's a D-ring in the pocket, because just in case you put multiple things in your pockets, you don't want to reach in, grab something and pull out everything else grabbing that thing. So everything ideally in your pockets should clip onto a D-ring if your pockets have a D-ring inside. Now that you've got up close and personal with your sausage, let's talk about actually deploying this thing without turning it into a circus act. Now, let's go through step by step on what to do on land so you can be well prepared to do this in the water. I want you to feel comfortable deploying from any depth, but know that your maximum depth allowed is going to depend on your spool length. Okay, step 1, position. You want to get stable first with strong buoyancy. If at any time your buoyancy feels off, pause the skill and focus on buoyancy first. Of course, you don't need to worry about buoyancy on land, but it's important to know this is the first step when you're getting ready to deploy. If you're practicing the skill and lose that buoyancy, then get stable first and then resume the skill. Avoid crashing into the bottom or other things around you, or especially ascending. Balance yourself out and feel good about your positioning. Look around you for anything that could interfere with your deployment, like divers in your team. Signal others at this time to let you know you're about to deploy your sausage. This hand signal means deploying SMB. So you can point at you, and you, watch me deploy DSMB. And I never realized how dirty this kind of feels when talking about safety sausage. Anyways, I digress. Now, we're going to unsheath our DSMB. And so, ideally, you want to practice doing this with one hand, but for learning, it's okay to use two hands if you need to. And some steps might just be easier with two hands anyways, like undoing this bungee, bam. But keep everything in one hand. Generally, you'll want to grab your clip, your spool, and your DSMB. So go ahead and unfurl it now, as so, and go ahead and make sure there's no snags or any issues with your sausage. You're not in any hurry to deploy your DSMB, so just feel relaxed, especially when you're practicing this skill, and especially in the water. Go ahead and at this time, unclip your clip as well, and you can take this thing and put it onto your D-ring on your DSMB to get it out of the way temporarily. You won't really need it until you're ready to deploy or after you deploy. So it's just good to get it out of the way for now and clip it off. So now you should be able to freely see that there's no immediate snags in your reel and your sausage is fully unfurled. And note that at this time you can go ahead and grab your inflator hose with your spool, kind of as so with one hand. You can hold it away from your body and see that there's no tangles and just kind of be ready for deploying it at this point. And you kind of want your other hand free just in case you need to grab your inflator hose or dump valve. Step 3, check again. Now look up one more time, look over your shoulder, both left and right. Ensure your friend Bob isn't above you, having a pleasant, relaxing moment before you're about to smash your sausage directly into his face. I can tell you that Bob will not enjoy that. Seriously though, make sure there is nothing above you. And at this point, it's not a bad idea to have a little bit of negative buoyancy, so you can let a little bit of air out of your BCD and breathe a little bit more shallowly so that you're a little negative. And as you fill your sausage, it will start giving you a little bit of positive buoyancy. And now, step 4, deploy. This is the part where you fill your sausage with air. But as mentioned earlier, there are several fill methods. But first, double check the sausage can fill with air and not tie up with any of your equipment. So if you're keeping it off to the side, and it's just kind of free, you can clearly see that it's not tying up with anything, and you want to pay a special attention to this line, make sure that it's in a good spot, and just inspect it. And just keep it off to the side until you're ready to deploy, so it has minimal chances of getting tangled up with anything around you. It can be a literal entanglement hazard, and you could find yourself deploying yourself with your sausage, and you don't want that. Double check that your finger is comfortably through the spool. Generally, you want this finger and just one finger. You can kind of think of this entire thing as a pre-deployment safety check. In reality, this safety check and all these checks won't take that long. It'll take maybe 30 seconds to a minute to deploy your DSMB. In reality, for practice, take as long as you need, especially getting through all these steps the first time. And then it's time to add a tiny bit of air. And so if you're doing an oral fill method, you can generally just push this into your mouth and add a small puff. It doesn't need to be much. And what this will do as it will fill the tip of your sausage and start giving it a little bit of an erection. But that's good because it's going to be easier to manipulate and it won't be kind of sad and just kind of droopy everywhere. This is going to be hard to practice on land, but I want you to get a feel for slowly adding in air so you can start trying to counter its positive buoyancy and, more importantly, not get pulled up with it. You want to stay down and unstable with your depth because it will try and pull you up, especially once full. So just fill it slowly and kind of get a feel for that when you're in the water. Okay, now let's talk about the two different methods of fill. So if it's an oral fill, at this point, you will grab the side of your regulator, not in front, but the side, and pull out the regulator. After you've taken a good breath, you don't want to empty your full lung into your sausage, just maybe half breath. And if you need more breaths, put the regulator back in, breathe, and then put another breath in. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you're completely out of breath just in case you need to struggle to get the regulator back in. Just focus on slow and controlled increases of air into your DSMB. Also, get practice with the offset of buoyancy as well. And you can just kind of practice this motion. Take it out and put it back in, take it out, put it back in. And a pro tip is you don't need to fill this thing full. Remember, if you're at 10 meters, that's 2 atmospheres. So that means if you just fill this thing with half air, it will be full by the time it hits the top. So that's cool. If you're at the safety stop, about 5 to 6 meters, or rather 15 to 20 feet, then you're looking at maybe like 60% air, a little bit over half. But the cool thing is you don't need to fill it fully, because if you do fill it fully, it's just going to counteract your balance and your buoyancy more, and you're going to have to struggle with that. And it could be a little bit hard. So don't fill it all the way full. You don't really need to. You do want it full when it's the surface, but remember, the air is going to expand. And it's worth noting that there's some pros and cons to this oral inflation valve. Some people don't like them, some people do. Obviously, it's going to be a matter of personal preference, but the normal, or maybe more common, method is going to be what I call method 2, or rather it's going to have a little flap on the bottom where you're going to be able to separate it. And so generally what you'll do is still add a little bit of air. If your sausage has an oral inflation, it's always nice to add a little bit of air just to get a little bit of that, erection, but it's going to make it a lot easier to then grab your octo. So the difference between method 1, which is oral, where you take your regulator out of your mouth, you don't have to do it with this other method. So you will just grab your spare octo, and while you're holding this like this, you're going to take the octo and try and put it in that little bottom area. You don't really need to connect it. You can start free flowing it and the bubbles will start pushing it in there. But if you want to be a little bit more safe about it, you can kind of stick it into the little slot on the bottom, add a little bit of air. And again, I want you to practice feeling that offset of the buoyancy, so just kind of fill it up slowly. And remember, you don't need to fill it all the way full either, just a little bit, puffs at a time, to kind of get the sense of the buoyancy and how it's affecting you and controlling it. When you get to 60%, go ahead and be ready to put your octo away. And also, if the same for oral, if you got to 60% and at the safety stop, which by the way, let's just go ahead and say we're at the safety stop because I've been talking about 60%. So we're at the safety stop. 60% is probably roughly where we want to be. Now you're ready to deploy your DSMB. And it's very important that I want you to have good control of your buoyancy and depth at this point. I want you to have filled it with 60% and slowly. And this important thing is slowly, because I want you to feel comfortable holding a 60% balloon and still staying relatively stable. And the only way that this is going to feel natural is if you did it slowly. And this also ensures that if by some chance it does snag on your gear, it's not going to be mission critical because you have been controlling your buoyancy up to this point. It shouldn't pull you up, ideally. And if you ever feel during this whole process your buoyancy is getting a little shaky, go ahead and pause the skill. Get your buoyancy stable. Watch your dive computer, control your depth, just breathe in, breathe out. Make sure you're fairly neutral, get comfortable again, and then go ahead and resume the skill. Just pause the skill if you ever feel you're dropping or ascending. It's much more important to control your buoyancy first, and then the skill comes after that. And during this whole process, make sure you never clip the sausage to yourself at any point during deployment until you're ready to stow that thing at the end of the dive and put it into a pocket. You should never clip it during this process. Now, we are ready to let our sausage fly. You can go ahead and take the other hand and basically let it go. And at this point, it will make its way to the surface. As it deploys, the spool will spin freely and the edges can feel sharp. You want it to spin freely while keeping it away from your face, skin, and gear. As the sausage expands with gas, it will want to rocket upward with strong positive buoyancy and possibly take you with it. So you gotta keep it in control. It will be very fast and very brief. Once it gets to the top, you'll find the reel stops spinning. Stay calm and in control. If you feel it pulling too hard, just let go. You just have a finger in there, just let go. Ideally, if it's spinning on your finger, you should be able to maintain buoyancy and trim. If you do let go of the spool, don't try and grab it until after it's done spinning rapidly from deployment. Remember, it's a buzzsaw while spinning. After it's reached the top, it will stop spinning and just gently start dropping. It's safe to grab at this point, so try out how good of a receiver you are and try and grab it. But if you miss it, no worries, don't chase it. Just let it drop all the way till it reaches the end of its line, and then you can start pulling it back up, holding your depth where you were. So as you can kind of see, it's gonna basically, the reel, I have already, imagine I dropped it, and it's going to hit its inevitable end. This is a very long reel. I'm gonna have fun, a lot of fun trying to reel it back up as well. But you can see it's tied. So this will be basically on the bottom, and I can start pulling the string up. You don't need to be super fancy with it, but you can kind of start creating a little bundle. Also, keep in mind, you don't want this to be an entanglement hazard. And as you get this, then you can drop your line and start reeling it back onto the spool until it's tight again. And whether you dropped it or you didn't, at this point, you want to go ahead and just tie your line until it's tight. And basically, holding your depth where you are, go ahead and wind it until it's tight. And when it's tight, it's as important, you'll pull on the balloon and make it erect on the surface. And that's a very important thing. So you always want to keep reeling it in and keeping the surface line tight so that it is erect. Because remember, that erection is going to make it visible, and the visibility is the most important thing of that DSMB, that sausage on the surface. Go ahead and while I'm reeling in the line, I am moving the line around my spool like this. I'm not trying to spin my spool like this, which is very hard to do and easy to drop. So I wouldn't bother doing that at all. I just do this. It's gonna be much easier for you. And let's go ahead and talk about the double enders. Some will prefer to put the double ender before deployment. And the reason why this might be beneficial for those who have a very light reel. If you have a very light reel, having the double ender will make sure that it continues to fall down to you. Because if it's like a neutrally buoyant spool and line, this thing may fall very slowly down to you. And so you might want to have a little bit more negative buoyancy by putting it on the line like this. Right before I put air into my SMB, I could put my double ender on there for an extra negative buoyancy on the line. And so as this is falling, it's going to fall a little bit faster, which is nice if it is neutral buoyant. If it's already negative, you don't really need it on there. So you could keep this clipped and just put it on. After your sausage reaches the surface, go ahead and put it on at that point. And what you could do is just use it to help wind up your spool like this. It makes it a little bit easier, but you don't need to. But more importantly, you're gonna need it to clip it off once it's tight as well. So once you do have the line all the way on there, I'll clip it off. And so once I have it tight, I can go ahead and clip it off on the side like this. And this is nice because now I have a stable depth, and you can actually use the sausage on the surface connected with your line and clipped off like this to kind of hold your buoyancy. You don't even have to worry about your depth anymore because all you have to do is put weight on the line, because you want it to maintain the erection. I'm never gonna let that joke go. Anyways, maintain that erection, keep it visible, and you just put, it will help control your depth. And so make sure, again, I want to repeat, you don't connect this to you. It should always just be on the line to hold your depth, because now you don't have to worry about it. You can just hang on it and it's fine. But do not clip this to you in any fashion or way, because maybe a boat comes by, maybe full of rowdy little teenagers. They grab your sausage and rip it right out of your hands. This could be a very potentially dangerous situation if you're going with it, so that's why we don't clip it off to you. Anyways, at this point, you'll be feeling pretty good about yourself if you've done everything right so far and you didn't deploy yourself with your sausage. You've deployed successfully. And hopefully, you're not also on the surface of the water. But here is where you want to make sure you keep the tension on the line. And this is step 5, by the way, maintaining that erection. So keeping the tension on the line and basically doing the rest of your safety stop and just keeping that tension during the safety stop until you're ready to ascend. And as you're ascending, you can go ahead and unclip after your safety stop and have this around one finger, and then just slowly pull yourself up to the surface. Because if you're pulling yourself up and you're still counterweighting it, you'll keep the buoyancy erect at the surface, and just, it's a very slow ascent because it's going to take a little bit of time to wind this thing up anyway, so it's a good rate to ascend to the surface. And in step 6, surface like a pro. When you get to the surface, you want to keep your sausage still standing until the surface support arrives, or as long as you're on the surface. You don't want other boats to hit you. So don't grab it and start hitting others with it. Just keep it high in the sky until it's very obvious the boat has seen you and is making its approach. When your boat is clearly arrived, then you can go ahead and start putting your sausage away. You can tug on the OPV to let the air out and start rolling your sausage up to be stowed again. Alternatively, you can probably just throw the whole thing in the boat as well. So, a 6-step process. The acronym of POODLES. It's kind of like the dog, poodle, but it sounds like it. But it's PULDES, POODLES. And this is an acronym that will hopefully help you remember these steps when you're in the water. All right, now that you know how it's done and practices a few times on land, and this video will always be there for reference, now it's time to practice. The first time you deploy, you should start in a fairly shallow depth, like 6 meters or 20 feet in calm waters. Practice POODLES, position, unsheath, look, deploy, erection, and surface. Every few dives, let others know you will deploy your sausage at the end of the dive for practice. The first time you deploy, I highly recommend you do your safety stop first, until you start getting comfortable knowing that you will have successful deployments and you're probably not going to deploy yourself with your DSMB. Just as a safety precaution, do your safety stop and then deploy. But once you get comfortable, then do it at the beginning of the stop. When you're practicing, don't rush. Remember POODLES. Go through it slowly. Seriously, don't rush. Go slow. Deploying your sausage is not a race. When you're practicing, don't rush. Remember POODLES. This acronym will be there and you can go slowly through it. And just remember, deploying your sausage is not a race. Buoyancy first and then the skill. After you're feeling a little bit more comfortable deployments, you could practice underinflating it, letting it pop to the top and then reel it down and trying doing it again. Just remember, you're probably going to have to let the air out with your OPV. By underinflating, you ensure it's easier to practice, and even if you flubber it up, you likely won't go up with it. The goal is to build muscle memory and stay in perfect buoyancy and good trim while doing it. And once you're nailing that, challenge yourself. Practice putting it away, unraveling it, and stowing it in the water. Just don't drop it. Practice deploying mostly one-handed with your right hand, keeping your left hand mostly free. There are times where you can use your left hand, but try to do most things with that right hand as I showed. Strategically using that left hand for the air fill and removing the bungee. And as you're feeling more comfortable with that, you can practice adding more air and filling it even full to be able to compensate the additional buoyancy and still being stable. Then you can go to try and deploy it in deeper depths like 10 meters and then 15 meters and then 16 meters, or rather 33 feet and 66 feet. And then getting even more advanced and continuing to practice and building your skill, try deploying it without obvious reference points. This puts a lot more focus on needing to rely on your dive computer for depth, and so you'll have to be able to multitask, deploying your DSMB while having eyes on that dive computer and being aware of that depth at all times. And lastly, you can practice deploying in current, which is ideally where you probably want to use the skill most. Technical divers will use their safety sausages for even decompression stops, but even recreational divers, mastering this skill means that you're ensuring that if current catches you off guard, you can notify surface support and can warn others that you're there, and ensure that if you're a lost diver, your team can spot you on the surface while you're still surfacing. That's really cool. It keeps diving fun and safe overall. So there you have it. By honing your DSMB skills, you're not just improving a single aspect of your diving, you're elevating your entire underwater experience and setting yourself apart as a truly proficient and safe diver. If you enjoyed this video, click on this one that will help you fully understand the anatomy of DSMB. If you like this video, you'll probably like that one next. And until next time.